Close your eyes and imagine. What if the things in life that cause us the greatest pain, the things that bring us grief, are challenges? Challenges designed to help us grow, to ultimately become what we were always meant to be. We feel like we've been buried, but what if, like a seed, we've been planted? And having been planted, we grow to become a mighty tree. Now, open your eyes. Open your eyes to this way of viewing life. Come with me as we explore your true, infinite, eternal nature. This is Grief to Growth, and I am your host, Brian Smith. Hey everybody, this is Brian. I'm back with another episode of Grief to Growth, and I've got with me today Dave Richman, and David Richman, I should say. David has written a book called Cycle of Lives. It's a fascinating book, and we're going to get into what that is. But first, I want to introduce David, and then we'll talk about himself and what prompted him to write the book. So Dave is an entrepreneur. He's an author. He's a public speaker. He's an athlete, and he's a philanthropist. He uses the lessons he learned in his life to enrich and inspire others. And as a former sedentary, overweight smoker, David knew that he needed to focus not on what others wanted out of him, but what he wanted out of life. And his first book is Winning in the Middle of the Pack. He discussed how to get more out of ourselves than ever imagined. Now, in this new book, The Cycle of Lives, he shares the interconnected stories of overcoming obstacles, specifically cancer. And so with that, I want to welcome David Richman to Grief to Growth.
Thank you, Brian. I'm really excited to be here. I definitely am looking forward to a good conversation.
Yeah, I'm looking forward too. I got the book like last week, and I was able to chance to take a look through it and read a couple of the stories. I want to talk about you first, though, and talk about what prompted you or how you got to the point where you became a cyclist. I see that you were a sedentary, overweight smoker at one point, and I look at you now. You're like, it's kind of hard to believe. So, what transitioned you out of that?
It was a crazy set of circumstances, Brian. So, I mean, basically what happened was this. Like people evolve over time, and you kind of, sometimes you just don't know what you don't know until you know it. And then at that point, you know it.
Yeah.
And one day I woke up and I just found myself in a situation that you'd think I could have had more awareness of until that moment, but I didn't. And once I had awareness of it, it was such an obvious situation that I was in that I just kind of like, it's a higher level observation, went, what the heck are you doing? So I was pretty successful in business, and I had friends, and I'm happy and life's good. But on the other side of the coin, I was not very happy in my personal life. I was married to a very abusive alcoholic. My twins were 4. My sister had just been diagnosed with cancer, and it was going to be a losing battle in the end. They knew that. They just didn't know how long it was going to be. And one day I just woke up and said, what the heck are you doing? And it just hit me at that point. And I had to get my kids out of that situation. I needed to get myself out of that situation too, but definitely I needed to get my kids out of that situation. And without getting into a lot of details, I was kind of able to broker a deal that says, we'll split the kids, but I'm driving them everywhere, no back and forth, no interaction between us. I'll take care of all the scheduling. I'll do whatever. It's just, we need to not be in this situation. And when we were able to get out of that situation, it was great. And about maybe a month or 2 later, my daughter was, they're twins. My daughter came home from school, and I think she must have told her kindergarten teacher at the time that her auntie had cancer. And she said, oh, does she smoke? Because, smoking causes cancer. And my daughter's like, no, but my dad does. And she talked to me about that. And she said, will you quit smoking? And I was just like, I had told myself that or heard that 100 times before, but it never hit it. So I said to her, Danielle, I'll do it. I'll stop smoking, but you got to stop sucking your thumb. Right. So, so let's make a deal. So we made that deal. That was in February. In March, I ran a 5K. So I stopped smoking. I went running for like a minute. Couldn't, then 2 minutes and 5 minutes and 10 minutes, then did 10K, 5K, then 10K. Then I jumped on my bike and I made it a triathlon. And then I did a half Ironman. And then by November of that year, I did a full Ironman.
Wow.
And I said to myself, like, I want to be healthy. I want to be active. I want to be healthy. And being overweight and being miserable and smoking and drinking too much and being unhappy and not caring about myself was not going to make me happy. Yeah. It certainly wasn't a good example for my kids either, right? So I just said, well, let's just keep going on that athletic path. And I did, like, so far I've done like 15 Ironmans. I've done more than 50 runs longer than 50 miles. I've run 100 miles a couple of times. I've just done a bike across the country. I've done crazy stuff.
Yeah.
So that's kind of the genesis of that whole transformation.
Yeah. And the book is Cycle of Lives. And I didn't say it's 15 people's stories, but you actually met these 15 people you met them before, but you did a 5,000 mile ride across the country.
Yeah, which was nuts. So here's how the book happened, right? Because I'll give you the background, and then you'll understand why I went to go take my bike across the country. So, I'm like I said to you, I've listened to some of your podcasts. You do talk about the different ways in which people handle grief and kind of what enlightens them to take whatever action they're going to take to process and then move forward from their grief. And when my kids were about 9, so this is like 4 years later, my sister's super close to being taken by the cancer. Okay. And she was going to do this Relay for Life. I don't know if you ever heard of them. It's an American Cancer Society Relay for Life. Everybody gets on the track. You walk 24 hours, put together a team, you raise money, you raise awareness, you support people, whatever. It's a pretty big deal, right? Yeah, and they're all over the place, right? It's kind of cool. So my sister said, hey, I'm going to do this 24-hour Relay for Life. I'm going to be out on the field cheering on the people that are on my team that are walking there to support me. And I thought, well, that's pretty brave considering how sick she was. I said, if you're going to be out there for the whole 24 hours, I'll run around the track. And that felt to me like a good trade-off, right? Well, unfortunately, she died a couple of days before that Relay for Life, and wasn't able to be out there. But I still had to hold up my end of the bargain. So me and my kids went out there and with the whole team and everybody else. We were out there for the whole 24 hours.
Wow.
One of the things I noticed, Brian, was that people were really good about dealing with the tasks of cancer. How do I navigate the healthcare system? How do I navigate work? How am I going to get my kids fed while I'm doing chemo? Right? They got the tasks of it, but people didn't really talk about the emotions of it. And I certainly wasn't talking about it. In fact, I haven't talked about this too much, but her husband and kids that were left behind, they literally couldn't talk, right? They were stuck in their own, understandably so, stuck in their own, immediate grief that they had and loss. So, but they weren't able to talk about the emotions of cancer. And that just kind of stuck in my head that, why do we have to take this journey about the emotions on our own? And so every year I did another fundraiser for her, or for the cancer center that took care of her. And I did these events, and they were all kind of bringing light to cancer and whatever. And I realized that everybody was still, no matter where I did it, didn't matter if it was the caregiver, the receiver, a survivor, a loved one, or whatever, they just all had one thing in common. They couldn't talk about the emotions of it. Right? And some of them hadn't talked internally about their emotional journey.
Right.
And so I said, well, that's a pretty interesting theme. And I said, well, so what seems to be connecting us? And it isn't the type of cancer that connects us. It isn't how old you are or young you are that connects us. That's all different. What severity of cancer is different. Whether you have cancer and live in because of your cancer a certain way or in spite of your cancer. So none of those things connect us. The one thing that connects us as human beings, in my opinion, is our emotions. And that was the one thing that I felt that was a parallel, a connector.
Yeah.
And one thing that was for sure with everybody that I talked to was that one common thing, Brian, no matter how many factors came into it that were different, the one thing that was the same was that not ability to process and discuss their emotions. So I went on this crazy journey of cold calling comprehensive cancer centers, hospitals, friends, people in the medical industry, people that I knew had friends that had cancer. And I just tried to collect these crazy stories about people who had experienced a wide range of different factors, but who hadn't processed the emotions on it. And what made them interesting and compelling was the traumas that they had endured leading up to when they encountered cancer. And those traumas were not unlike a lot of the traumas that you've talked about in some of your podcasts and yours also, of loss, abandonment, suicide, drug abuse, addiction, physical abuse, you name it. There are all these things that people had endured in life that I think we can all relate to.
Right.
And how did those traumas affect their cancer journey? And I thought, boy, if I got these interesting perspectives from all these different types of cancers, ages of people, people across the country, different wealth backgrounds, immigrants, whatever. And I just said, you got an interesting story. Let's talk about the emotional side of it. So I interviewed them for a couple of years. And then I said, well, what better way to connect us? It's a long answer to your question. What better way to connect us than if I jump on my bike and I bike and go meet them all for the first time?
Yeah, and that was quite a journey in itself, is biking 5,000 miles. I don't know if people can appreciate how difficult that is. And reading in the book, I know even starting out, it wasn't easy.
No, it definitely wasn't easy. I didn't appreciate how hard it was going to be, because what I did was I set out to do it in 8 weeks, 5,000 miles in 8 weeks, but I had to cut it shorter. I had to make it in 6 weeks. And so I did 4,700 miles in 45 days. And I only took off 4 days off. So if you do the math, I was doing more than 100 miles a day.
Yeah.
And I'm stopping at cancer centers. I'm stopping to meet the people that I met at the book. I'm stopping to talk to a gazillion strangers who also, Brian, had the same thing. They had all encountered cancer in one way or another, and they all hadn't talked about or dealt with the emotions, or don't know how to talk to people about the things that they're going through, right?
Yeah.
But I had no idea how hard it was going to be, because I was flat tire after flat tire. Most of the time I was on like interstate highways because I had to get from point A to point B. So I got trucks barreling by me, and I ran into a hurricane, and it was a mess, dude. It was hard.
Yeah.
It was hard.
So you interviewed these 15 people. They're all different stories. Some of them are survivors. Some of them, that they succumbed to the cancer. Some of them are caregivers. And so, what did you find in common with the people that you interviewed?
Well, the thing that they had in common going into it was something that shocked me, right? Something that shocked me, and I think you'll get this. I think your listeners will get this as well. Is when we're going through the things we're going through, no matter how crazy they might seem to other people, they don't seem that crazy to us, because it's our lives and that's what we have to deal with, right?
Yeah.
So you just do what you need to do to survive, right? And that's what you do. And other people look at you going, oh my God, Brian, how in the world did you make it through that? That's the most ridiculous thing I ever heard of. And you go, no, it's really not that ridiculous. This is my life and I'm just trying to live it, right? So the one thing they had in common was that they didn't think that their crazy, ridiculously interesting and spectacular stories were anything but ordinary.
Yeah.
And I think that that's important, because if we peel back the cover and figure out what's inside of your head or my head, people will be shocked at what we've gone through or what we've dealt with. And we would be the same way with them, but it's just our lives. So we don't think we're ordinary. So, I mean, extraordinary. So I was able to really get deep into these people's stories, and they're fascinating stories. So that was one thing in common. The other thing in common was that there was a degree in some of them of having processed these emotions, but honestly, Brian, all of them hadn't really processed it, and some of them hadn't begun to process the emotions of cancer. And so when I sat down with, say, for example, this wonderful woman who's an oncologist, and she just had this ridiculous childhood, very difficult, and is a wonderful oncologist. She's really well respected in the world of oncology and survivorship and advocacy. When we sat down and talked, I said to her, I said, Doc, I got to ask you stuff that you don't talk to others about. And she said, good, because I don't talk to anybody about this stuff. Never have. And so I got to go on this journey exploring the emotions of people that are just like you and me, who haven't taken the time to explore these emotions. So the things they had in common were that. They didn't think they were extraordinary. Their stories were fascinating. And two, they hadn't processed the emotions. So we were able to go on that journey together.
Yeah, it's interesting as you say that, because I deal a lot with people, parents who've had children transition, children cross over, pass, die, and I was just right before I was talking with someone, who was a father whose his son passed away, and people look at us and they say, "Oh, wow, you're such a strong person. I could never do what you've done," and I think you put it very, very well. We all do what we have to do. And I think one of the things we have in common as human beings is this resilience of the human spirit that's just so much stronger. And we see it in other people, but we can't imagine we really have it in ourselves.
Yeah. It's really well said. And it's a little trite to compare it to an example I'm going to give you from my first book. But one of the things that I learned in this journey of, because see, I wrote the first book going, like, I've been living my life for everybody else. I wanted to be a good kid to my parents. I wanted to be a good kid in school. I wanted to be a good employee. I wanted to be a good boss. I wanted to be a good boyfriend. I wanted to be a good husband. But what about being good to me? And I realized that once I started saying, well, be in the middle of the pack. Like, don't worry about what people are looking at. Because in the middle of the pack, nobody cares, right? It's just you.
Mm-hmm.
Right? So I said, once you start focusing on you, why don't you worry about setting your own goals? And I think we don't set our goals high enough.
Yeah.
Right. And I think that if you're, if I said to you, this is an example I like to give, Brian. I go, if I said to you, hey, there's a 250-story buildings, and there's a ladder across the 250-story buildings. I'd like you to walk from one side to the other. That's a goal I have for you.
Mm-hmm.
You'd be like, heck no, I would never do that. And I go, well, okay, I'm going to put $1 million on the other side of the building. And you might go, no, heck no, there's no way I would do that. And I say, okay, I'm going to put $100 million on the other side of the building. You go, no amount of money would make me walk across that thing. And I go, okay, well, how about this? You never have to work another day in your life if you make it across. You go, it's not worth it to me.
Mm-hmm.
Okay? Now I go, okay, well, I'm going to put your sister and your son and your mom in the middle of the ladder, and you better rush over there in 50-mile-an-hour winds and save them before they fall off. A lot of people would do it without even thinking about it.
Of course, yeah.
So what is the thing that's going to motivate you to just be able to overcome whatever challenge? A lot of times we're forced to deal with heavy, hard things, and we don't know we can until we do. We're just living our life, like you said.
Yeah.
But sometimes, we also don't believe in ourselves enough that we challenge ourselves enough. We don't set a high enough goal. And I think that's what limits us. And so I think if you are able to overcome difficult circumstances, and you're able to understand that you have that resiliency and you have that ability to overcome, it does give you some empowerment to continually go deeper. I mean, could you imagine what you have gone through? And before you went through that, could you imagine that you'd be the person telling other people how to deal with the things that you had to deal with?
Oh, yeah, no, I didn't think I'd be here. It's been 5 years, and there's no way I thought I'd be here 5 years later.
Not only here, but here affecting people's lives in a positive way. That's something you could have never imagined.
No,
probably, right? I mean,
no, not at all. And I got to tell you, I love the analogy or the metaphor of the endurance athlete, and I think about yourself and you saying, okay, I was an overweight, sedentary smoker, and I
Yeah.
just started running, a minute at a time, and then now I'm doing these Ironmans and stuff. And then, frankly, I look at that and I'm like, I could never do an Ironman. I could never even run a marathon. And I want to read this quote from the book. I love this
Yeah.
quote from Rick in the book. He says, "Life is kind of like running the last mile of a competitive marathon. You think you know it's coming. It's what you do. You've been through so much and done unbelievable amounts of training. You believe in yourself and your ability to push through anything. You're in command and you've got the balls to put it all on the line. And then the last 100 yards comes. You see the finish line. You've crossed it before. You know what's coming and how to deal with it. The pain burns a hole through your chest and shreds your legs. A meat grinder rips your lungs and rips apart your lungs. And you start to question everything. You start to doubt. The pain is unbearable, unimaginable, much worse than you think you can handle. And if you try to control it, you're going to lose. The only way to make it to the finish line is to give in to the pain, to let go, to embrace the unknown and allow some higher power, some unknown source, something outside of yourself, because you have nothing left inside to take you forward across the line." He says, "I'm blessed to have learned that kind of relinquishment in my personal life." I read that and I was like, wow, I just thought that's just so powerful. And as I said, I deal with parents when our children pass, we're like, I can't do this. There's no way that I can do this. And we talk about this thing called soul planning. It's like, did we plan this? Did we set this thing up? And maybe I bit off more than I can chew. And I love it. I never run a marathon, but I can only imagine what that must feel like.
Yeah, it's and you were giving me chills when you read that, because I've read the book about 1,000 times, through the writing and editing and rewriting and re-editing, blah 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 phase. But I've never heard the words from somebody else, and that's what maybe not exactly word for word, but that's what he told me, and it's a
Mhm.
powerful, powerful lesson to learn. Is when you're shredded through a meat grinder and you got nothing left to give, you just gotta just figure out a way of going forward. I mean, you just gotta figure it out.
Mhm.
And I did that. I'll never forget. I'll never forget that exact minute in my life that I determined that I was either going to push myself into an area I had no idea that I even belonged in, let alone could explore, and where I stopped myself before and turned away and go, no, that's not me, right? I know exactly the moment where I was, and it's just this minute in my life where I said, you either have to pack your bags and go home, or you have to take a step forward, right?
Mhm.
Those are only two options. And once you take a step forward, that's a place you've never been before. Obviously, the next step forward will be the place you've never been before, and the next one, and the next one, and the next one. So who are you going to be? You're going to go back into the place that you know everything about yourself and what you're capable of, or you're going to go explore an area that is someplace you've never been before. And I think that is a thing that we can apply to physical exertion, mental struggles, uh, career aspirations, overcoming grief, overcoming a difficulty. It's like, let's figure out a way to just give into the unknown and just see what we're made of. And not always going to win, right? But I'm definitely going to be further than I was had I not taken that step.
Yeah, yeah. One thing I noticed in the book, and I love this part also, you talk about after June passed,
Yeah,
you felt this abandonment, I guess, by her friends and your own friends. And that's
yeah,
something not a lot of people talk about. That when we go through this, like the most difficult thing in our life, and I was just talking with a group of parents about this last night, a lot of times the people that we think are going to be there for us just kind of go away. Is that part of what prompted you to write the book?
yeah, yeah, definitely. And I don't know, Brian, that I still have processed it, and I have differing opinions
Hmm.
on whether or not I care to process it or want to process it. But one of those driving factors is the fact that I've been estranged from my mom for going on nearly 40 years.
Mm.
A scary number. That's a scary, scary number.
Yeah.
Um, she, just it's the choice that she made. It's not the choice I made, but it's the choice that she made.
Hmm.
Um, and and um, and so I didn't have her to turn to. My dad was very old when I was born. He was 59 when I was born. So he died when I was very young. So I didn't have him to turn to. And neither one had any family that we were involved with. So the only person I really had was my sister.
Yeah.
And so it was shocking to me. I mean, Brian, it was really shocking to me that I couldn't, even though I reached out to, I got nothing back from the people that were in her life. Not one single person. It was shocking to me. And I think it's because they had such a profound sense of loss, and they had such a lighter connection to me than they did to her. And I don't know what it was, but I definitely know that connecting to people on that level about my issues of being abandoned, or my issues of really realizing that I was alone in this thing, that definitely prompted me to do it, because I wanted to understand, and I didn't make it about me when I was interviewing these people, but I did try to learn.
I'll tell you, David, it's not uncommon. And it's funny. I was just talking with the group of parents I was with last night. We were talking about this very thing. It's not uncommon that the people we think are going to be closest to us kind of go away. And we all try to analyze it. Is it because they're scared? In that case, we're parents. Are they scared we're like contagious and their kids are going to die? Is it because we make them feel sad? We all think about what it is. And we all came to the conclusion, well, we can't take it personally, whatever it is, because it seems to be almost universal that when we have this deepest loss, that a lot of times that's when people disconnect from us. But I think it goes to what you talk about with your whole theme of the book, people not processing these deep emotions, and they're not equipped to it. So they turn and they walk away.
They do. And it's easy to do, right? I mean, it's easy to build a safe little box for ourselves. And even though it might not be the kind of box we want to be in, it's easy to kind of be in it. And it was shocking to me, Brian, how many people, I mean, not how many, that every single person that I talked to said, I don't. Can I tell you a super quick story about this family in New Mexico? So all along the way, right, anytime you're doing anything crazy, right, you're starting a podcast and you're starting to counsel people, and you got to question yourself, like, am I really making an impact? Is this really worth doing? Am I faking it? Whatever, right?
Yeah.
So, but it's nice to get some reinforcement going. Okay, maybe if I even impacted one person, okay, I'm gonna keep going, and I'm gonna impact another and keep going. It kind of fuels you to get rid of those insecurities, right?
Yes,
so
absolutely.
Right. So you know what I mean. So, so all along the way, when I'm talking to people, it's all good. That I go, the same theme. Like I never talked about. So let me get to the point. So I'm in New Mexico. I'm there with my friend Jerry. My wife is there. She was my fiance at the time. My kids are still in school, so they can't be on this with me. And Jerry's parents or Jerry's family takes me out for brunch. I'm on the middle of the bike ride. I got a free day. This is my first day off, like in 11 days. I'm in New Mexico, and as we're getting ready to sit down to this big family, this big close Mexican family, and the dad, who's he's got to be in his late 70s, maybe early 80s, and he pulls me aside and he says, "Come here, my boy." And I said, "Yeah." And he says, "Hey, listen, I appreciate what you're doing. I don't like to talk about it too much, but 15 years ago, I went through cancer. It was pretty serious, but I made it through. And you rely on your family, and you think about your work and whatever." He says, "And what? This thing about talking about what's in here," and he points to his heart, and talking about what's in here. He goes, "Those things are so important." And I went, "Oh, thank you. That's really nice." And then just as we're sitting down, his daughter, who's my buddy's sister, she's like in her early 50s, and she waves me over, and I come over, and she goes, "I don't know if Jerry told you this, but I had a pretty severe case of breast cancer, and made me leave my job and become a lobbyist for patient rights and blah, 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 blah." And it was a really emotional journey. And just this whole concept of you talking to people about their emotions is so important. And I'm really, really glad that you're doing it. So we sit down, we have this big brunch with all these the big family and the whole thing. Everybody's laughing and joking, whatever. And I'm like, wow, man, if every family couldn't just be like this, right? How awesome. They all like how they're all in it together.
Yeah.
So I get up and I thank them and I go, it's not everybody that is like this. And I look to the dad, I go, for you to be able to trust your family and trust yourself and talk about this stuff. And he looks down and puts his hands in his lap. And I go, what? And he said, oh, no. I didn't talk about this stuff. He said, I didn't want to burden my family. He goes, I'm in school, you do what you do, you get through it. You don't want to bring other people down. And I'm like, but you just told me. Yeah. It's a good thing you're writing the book. And he goes, well, it's a good thing that you're doing it because you could teach people how to do it. And I look at the daughter and I go, well, at least you just told me about how family and blah, 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 blah. At least you were able to talk to your dad and da-da-da-da. And she looks down and puts her hands in her lap and she shakes her head. And I go, what? And she looks up and she starts crying and she goes, yeah, I didn't talk to anybody about this. I didn't talk to my dad. He could have lost a daughter. I didn't want him to feel guilty. Right. I didn't want him to remember his cancer. I didn't want to burden him with my stuff. I said, but you're so close. They go, we are. And I go, but you told me it's a good thing I'm doing this book. And they go, we are. We just don't talk about it.
Yeah.
Like, it's so powerful to keep going because that it's so common and so universal that we lock up that part of us.
We'll get back to Grief to Growth in just a few seconds. Did you know that Brian is an author and a life coach? If you're grieving or know someone who is grieving, his book, Grief to Growth, is a best-selling, easy-to-read book that might help you or someone you know. People work with Brian as a life coach to break through barriers and live their best lives. You can find out more about Brian and what he offers at www.grieftogrowth.com, www.grief2growth.com, or text growth, GROWTH, to 31996. If you'd like to support this podcast, visit www.patreon.com/grieftogrowth, www.patreon.com/GRIEF2GROWTH to make a financial contribution. And now, back to Grief to Growth.
So it's pretty
absolutely. And maybe that is a part of, what we talked about, this abandonment thing, because sometimes it seems like the people that are closest to us are the ones we can't talk to about it, which gets me to, so how did you get these strangers, these people to open up to you on the level that you got to tell these 15 stories?
I paid them a lot. No, I didn't pay them anything. I sold them a bill of goods. No, I didn't do that. I really set out to do something. Okay. First of all, I think they were partly okay doing it because I told them that the entirety of the net proceeds, so whatever I make less the cost of what it is to do it, 100% of that's going to go to a charity of their choice. So we divide up 100% of the profits gets divided up between each one's particular cancer focused charity or other charity. Then we divide it up. So the fact that they knew I wasn't trying to make money off the thing was a big deal.
Yeah.
I think that at least they were almost all of them were strangers. I think one of them wasn't a stranger. So at least they trusted me at the beginning. Then I said to them, look, here's what the goal of the book is. The goal of the book is to start conversations. It's hard. It's hard to have these conversations, right? It's super, super hard. And when I talked to them just a couple of times, we had to agree about the fact that they hadn't processed their emotions. Right? Not one single person said they had. Not one person said, I'm at peace with everything that's going on in my life, right?
Right.
It's just not the way it works.
Wow.
So they all believed in that premise that by exposing themselves, and if I were able to write it properly, that people might learn from it. And if they were able to learn from it, they might know how to talk to people that have had loss. They might know better to understand that the loss is not maybe the only dimension affecting their emotions. It might not be the only facet. Maybe that loss is a remembrance of 10 losses they had earlier in their life, or what, you know what I'm saying? There's
Yeah.
just, people just aren't one dimensional. And I thought and they believed in the fact that if I exposed their stories, and we went on this emotional journey together, or they talked about their emotional journey like they hadn't before,
Mm-hmm.
that we might be able to help people start conversations. And going into it with those two premises, then it was just a matter of being able to ask them questions and really listening. And I think people trust you if you're listening to them.
Yeah. Well, I think another part might have been the fact that you're coming at it from the passing. I don't use the word loss because I don't. We could talk about this, later on, what you believe about what happened to your sister June, but I don't. The passing of your sister, I think that gives you some credibility in their eyes, right? You're here because you've gone through this, and I want to ask you though. So you're doing this project to help other people heal. They're doing the project so they can help other people heal.
Yeah.
Was there any healing, do you think, that went on with yourself or the subjects of the book?
It's a great question, Brian. And I do know, and I feel really proud of the fact that a couple of people in the book, a couple of them had some very, very profound transformations of healing through our efforts. And I'm very proud of that because I actually feel very honored to have been a part of that. And I'm not saying this to bring the attention to the fact that I was, but it's very self-satisfying to know that I might have been a prompt for that.
Absolutely.
So that's a good thing, right? It's a good thing. We don't always get to measure the good things that we've done, or be reminded of them ever, or we even sometimes are too guilty to even acknowledge them, right?
Yeah.
I don't want to, right. So when it comes to my own healing, I think I have gotten a little bit better about it. I talked to somebody recently who asked me a question I hadn't pondered. It seems like an obvious question, but I hadn't pondered it. And they said, "Hey, June's looking down on you, and you could have a channel right now to talk to her. And what would she say about what you're doing?"
Mm-hmm.
And I thought to myself, "Wow, that's a good question." And I think she would say, first of all, I was making her proud, which is nice because you don't know that, but I think that, and then I also think that she would say that what you're doing is meaningful, and I think, as trite as it might sound to say something good can come from something bad, to know that you're trying to do something meaningful that's a deep thing that could come from negativity.
Absolutely.
It's a deep thing.
Absolutely. And I tell you, Dave, I get people asking me to bring authors on, with different books, and frankly, a lot of them I don't, because I'm not really interested in them. But when I got the proposal to bring you on, and I looked at the book, and I looked at the healing that comes from the book, and the healing, again, I think a lot of times when we set out to help other people, along the way, we actually end up helping ourselves. That's why I wanted to ask you that question, because I find it, like I said, the metaphor of the endurance athlete and the way we live our lives, I just think it's such a perfect metaphor. And you're getting across, getting your bike and riding across the country. And I used to bike ride some, so I can imagine the pain that that you went through, the actual literal physical pain to put this project together, to put this project out to the world, to help other people, to understand, and to know, I'm not alone. First of all, we read these stories, and I read the stories, and I'm like, wow, these people, some of these poor people, it just seems like things just kept happening to them and kept happening to them, but they kept overcoming and overcoming.
Yep. Yeah. And you're right. And it is a great metaphor. I mean, it is a great metaphor, but I'll tell you, this is going to sound strange because people are going to be like, really? How do you bike 15 hours, right? Sleep for 6 and get up and bike 12. Like, that's just physically, it's just ridiculous, right?
Mm-hmm.
And they're right. But I'll tell you why I did this, continue to do more and further endurance athletics. Wasn't for the physical.
Right.
It was for the mental, because when you think about it, you go, oh, I want to break from life. I'm gonna go have a drink and sit in front of television. I want to break from life. I'm gonna go to a movie. I want to break in life. I'm gonna go for a hike with my girlfriend or my boyfriend or a buddy. I'm gonna go bowling. Whatever you do to take a break. That break very rarely involves meditation. It very rarely involves doing, things where you're looking inwardly for more than a fraction of a period of time.
Yeah.
And I'll tell you something, when you run for an hour, you're not thinking about a lot, but you run for 25 hours, you get to think about a lot.
Yeah. I can only imagine. Yeah.
You get to think about a lot. When you go out on a 30-minute walk, you can think a lot. Go for a 12-hour walk and see if you don't come back with some revelations. And so I think that endurance athletics, especially for somebody that's in the middle, right? I'm not trying to win. I'm not trying to look good. I'm not trying to impress anybody. I'm just trying to do these things. And it does allow for some serious contemplation.
Yeah, absolutely. I hadn't really thought of it that way, but that's awesome. I don't run, but I walk 7 miles every day. So
that's a long way. That takes you a while.
It takes about an hour and a half.
Yeah.
So, but I was just talking to someone earlier about this. It's a time for me to meditate, or I'll listen to a podcast, or I'll listen to some uplifting music. So that's my first thing in the morning that I do to kind of turn within for myself. I think so I never really thought about this. If you run long distances, it's a great time to meditate.
Yeah. I'll tell you, Brian, one of the first times I went for a super long run was a 50-mile race in Vegas in the heat. It's called Running with the Devil. And then they do one in January that's called Running with an Angel. So it's same 50-mile thing, but one's cold weather, one's hot weather.
Wow.
That's therefore the names. And when I say hot, it was like 120 degrees hot.
Oh, wow.
Okay. And so I'm taking off on this run. I'm late. I'm tired. I'm cranky. It's going to be warm. Although I like the heat, it's going to be warm. But I'm not feeling the greatest or whatever. And I start running, and about like a mile in, I start going, I have this internal discussion with myself. I got 49 miles to go, and this is going to be brutal. And then I said, dude, calm down, man. Nobody's paying you to do this, right? Nobody asked you to do this. You're doing it for yourself. Grab a different perspective. Like, seriously, get a hold of yourself and grab a different perspective. And you know what I did for the next 4 hours until I turned around at the mile 25 part? I literally, Brian, I focused on that word perspective. And I said, oh, you mean perspective? You mean like a movie maker and all the different perspectives? And I thought of all the different movies and what perspective they were shot from. And I said, oh, perspective. Like, you mean how you walk into a room and are perceived by others? And I just literally contemplated the word perspective for 4 hours. And I went, when in my life would I ever have the opportunity to do that?
Yeah, that is deep. That is really awesome. And it's interesting. Cool. You chose the word perspective, because I was right before we got on this call, I was talking with the client about it. And the whole thing about life is perspective. It's all about perspective. We can be in the exact same situation, and we can choose how we look at that situation. And we can choose to look at the blessings, if you want to call it, from that, or the curses or whatever. And it's all a matter of how we choose to look at it.
Yeah, I totally agree with you, Brian. Perspective is really is everything, right? And it also allows us to relate to people too, if you understand the perspective, because if you can just maybe take a different view and maybe just slide a tad bit and really try to be on their side to see what they're seeing, or allow them to come to your side to see what you're seeing.
Yeah.
That meeting of perspectives. And that's why when I wrote the book, Brian, I did them as first person.
Yeah.
Originally, when I wrote it, I wrote it with me in the story. Each one of the stories, I kind of told it as me talking to them or whatever. And my editor, she looked at me and she said, dude, she goes, you need to take yourself out of these stories. It's not about you. It's about them. And I said, well, okay, but I want to do like first person perspective, third person. She goes, absolutely not. Mm-hmm. She goes, you got to write these stories as if it's them talking. You have to get into you got so far into their heads, you got to present their stories as them.
Mm-hmm.
So each one of the stories is told first person.
Yeah.
I had to place myself into their heads in their
Yeah.
hearts and make it first person from their story. And because I really cared about listening, and because I was dealing with very personal things with people, I really took that exercise seriously, where I had to take their perspective, or tried my best to.
Yeah, I think you did a great job, and I like the way you interspersed your own thing, what your journey was,
Yeah.
also along with them, because I want to know about you as well, and you do. I think you do a good job of blending the two. So if you, and I know there are 15 stories, and I can't ask you to pick your
Yeah.
favorite story, but just real quickly, give us a flavor for what one of the stories is.
Can I keep on the theme of your of kind of the themes that you talk about in your podcast? Can I give you that
Sure,
one?
be great. Yeah.
Because it's one that that shocked. It really shocked me to no end. And I'm going to tell you, I know that I've used the word. This will be the third time I've used it while we're talking trite. I'll have to come up with another word for that. But you know, an artist looks at their own work and they go, you know, a lot of actors, like, they never could watch their own movie because I can't see myself, because I'd be too critical of myself. Or, you know, Aldous Elba, when he was nominated the Sexiest Man Alive, he says, I look in the mirror and I see me, dude. I don't see anything sexy.
Yeah.
Right. So it's hard to look at your own stuff. And not every story moves me every time I read it. And again, because of the writing process and it being rewritten in many different editors and all this stuff, I've had to go through these stories a lot. There's a few stories that still move me, like give me chills or make me a little weepy, because I so identified with these people. And I never expected this one story I'm going to tell you about to affect me the way that it did, and the way it continues to affect me. And that is, I'm not going to give the whole story away, because I'm hoping some people go out and buy the book so that the money can go to charity, and then they'll be surprised when they read it.
Yeah.
Is that this woman, she was introduced to me by a friend who said, you're not going to believe the story, so I'm not going to tell it to you. I'm going to let her tell it to you, because it's literally not believable. But she tells it to you, and you're gonna determine whether or not you believe it or not. And it was the story of this woman who, very athletic, happily married, 2 young kids, and she gets cancer. She's an endurance athlete, very active, outdoors person, very positive. And she starts thinking to herself. She's a very religious woman, very deep faith. And she starts looking at herself, and she said, what did I do wrong, man, to get this cancer? Right? Was I unhealthy? No, I wasn't unhealthy. Was I a bad person? No, I've been a good person. Is it genetic? No, nobody in my family is. Was it environmental? No, it couldn't have been that. So she goes to her head of all these things that it could be. And she lands on the one thing it could be. And God is fighting her for something. That's the only thing she can come up with, is God has decided that she deserves this cancer. And so she makes a deal with the devil. And she says, I will make you a deal. You give me 10 years. That's all I need, because my kids can get out of the house by then. As long as my boys are gone, you go ahead and take me. But give me those 10 years and you can have my soul forever.
Wow.
Pretty deep, right?
Yeah.
And I can understand somebody having this thought. It wasn't going to take, just, you could do anything. Just don't let this happen, or just make this happen, or whatever.
Yeah.
I can relate to that. Who can't relate to that?
Yeah.
But
For
for a
kids,
woman,
sure.
right? For a woman of deep faith, for her to literally walk out of a church and close the doors behind her and say out loud, take me, I'm yours, just give me 10 years.
Yeah.
So what happens to her in this journey of 10 years, and what happens to her right at the 10-year mark, you literally will not believe it.
Yeah.
I mean, it's shocking. You'll believe it, but literally it's hard to believe what happens to her. And it's a story about how she regains her faith and goes kind of full circle on that whole emotional journey. And it's really profound. It's super profound. very unbelievable from the outside, but once you're in her head and you understand what she's going through, and you hear her tell the story, you believe it.
Yeah.
That's one of my favorites.
Yeah. Well, I think they're all good. And I think I said, I didn't really mean to ask you to pick a favorite. I just wanted to just give us a little bit of a flavor for what's in the book. Because one of the questions that, I asked your publisher for some questions, and one of the questions he asked was, are all the stories heavy? Are there any uplifting stories in the book? So I'm going to let you answer it, then I'll answer it.
Okay. Most definitely there are uplifting stories in the book. Most definitely. And not just uplifting stories in the book, but there are themes that are uplifting.
Mm-hmm.
For me, it was shocking to me how many people that I did not know stopped and said, "Oh, what are you doing? Can I help you? Do you need help or whatever? Do you mind if I pray for you?"
Mm.
I was like, "What do you want to pray for me for, dude? I'm just a guy on a bike, like riding across country." And I'm, no, we need to pray for you to be safe. We pray to get your message out. And I was kind of moved by that because I'm not a very deeply religious person. I have some hard beliefs and strong beliefs, but that came as a shock to me. That open, that's a very positive thing, right? How people were willing to help, very positive. How everybody wants to talk about these things, very positive. So there's some very positive themes throughout the book. Mm-hmm. Not every story is heavy, but I'm going to say we deal with heavy subjects in every story.
Yeah.
Right.
Well, yeah, for sure.
Right. Certainly the goal is not to burden people, but is to get them to understand the journeys that people went on and what kind of things they overcome or might still be trying to overcome, so that we can better identify with what they're going through, what people we care about are going through, better recognize what we're going through. And there are a lot of very positive outcomes in the book. There's some negative, no question, but this is a reality of life, I guess.
Yeah. And from my perspective,
give it to me.
I can see why people would think, it's the cycle of lives. It's about all these people with cancer. Why do I want to read a book like that? But it's very uplifting, and I see the power of the human spirit coming throughout this book. I see, the commonality of humanity. We think, I'm going through this. I'm the only one that's ever gone through anything like this. Woe is me. And we read this book and we go, okay, wow, this person's gone through something as bad. We always want to compare. This is worse than what I'm going through. That age-old question that you just touched upon, why me? Why do bad things happen to good people? What we call bad things. And I know people that have had cancer or dealt with cancer that said, it's actually one of the best things that's ever happened to me. And
absolutely.
Help and understanding that perspective. The fact that, you, in my opinion, honoring your sister with this work. I mean, I just think it's fantastic that you take something like your sister's passing and you turn it into this beautiful piece of work. So people say, well, this bad thing happened. What good could ever come out of it? This project itself is inspiring and uplifting. So I would encourage people to get the book, first of all, because I think it's a great book and I think you'll get a lot out of it, but also supporting this great cause that you're doing. And it reminds me, I just interviewed someone very recently, a project called Speaking Grief, and it's speakinggrief.org. And they just put together a film of people just talking about their grief. And I'm loving seeing people talk about grief, talking about hardship, talking about overcoming. And you touched on earlier, these families, we sit around the table with the people that are supposed to be the closest in our lives, and we can't share these things with them. But this gives us an outlet, right? This gives us not an excuse, but this gives us permission to share those things, and to talk about them and process them.
Yeah, and where this is going to sound a little self-serving, Brian, but yesterday I'm on the phone with the interim director of this one cancer organization's out on maternity leave. So there's an interim director, and I called her up, and there's some things we're trying to do to help promote the book or whatever. And I said, how far are you in the book? And she goes, well, I'm like, at this point. And I said, what do you think? And she goes, I did something I've never done before. And I go, what? And she said, well, one of the people in the book, we both know. Okay. And she said, I thought I knew this person. She goes, but when I read what happened to him,
Mm-hmm.
she goes, I literally, you could ask my husband this. She said, I literally tossed your book across the room. I was so angry at what happened to him. It so affected me. I thought I knew him, and I'm so sorry I didn't know this about him. I was so angry about what happened to him. And I went, well, I think that's a good thing, right? I mean, what he went through was not good. It was the worst thing ever.
Yeah.
But the fact that you could identify and you could feel about it, and maybe that's going to open up a new avenue for you to be able to talk to him about things. Maybe you'll understand better his perspective. That's a good thing, right? That's a good thing.
Yeah, absolutely. I think it's a great thing. And we all run around with masks on. And so even the people that think they know us, they don't really know us. And you know, it's interesting. It takes a project like this to read about someone that we thought we knew and say, oh, I didn't know this about this person.
Right.
Because we don't give ourselves permission to be real with each other.
Absolutely true, man. Absolutely true.
So we didn't talk about this before, but you know, you mentioning that, you know, my show is, there's a lot of metaphysical, to use that word, I guess, you know, themes to my show. And I know you listened to some of the things that we talked about. So what are your beliefs? You said some of the stories have negative outcomes, but what are your beliefs that happens to people when their body stops functioning?
Whoa, you put me on the spot, Brian. I'm not sure that I know. You know, I obviously I don't know, but I'm not sure if I know what I believe. I think what I believe, and I'm not positive about this, but I think what I believe is what a couple of your previous guests have touched upon, that we are somewhat maybe just a form of energy. And so if we are a form of energy, then, you know, energy can be related to time, because in order to measure energy, you have to measure it against something. You measure it against time, right? And we are here for the briefest blinks of time, but we're a pretty big force of energy. So if that is true, and we are just a piece of energy, then collectively, the amount of energy through the history of time and the history of people, when they die, that's a pretty big, powerful source. So I guess I believe that when people transition, they pass, they die, however you want to view it, that I think somehow, some way, they still remain part of some piece of energy. And I'm not sure how that's manifested, and I'm not sure what happens over time, but I gotta believe that as the universe is expanding, and as we go through the next couple of million years, we'll probably get closer to those answers.
Yeah. I know that was a bit of an unfair question I threw at you, but I wanted to kind of throw it out there because, as I said, you know, from my perspective, when I read the book, they're all positive outcomes. And I have a very good friend who just recently passed of cancer. When was it? Time flies so fast. It was in May. I guess it was 2 years ago. And she had gone to a healer, an energy healer. And the thing is, you know, the healer worked on her, and then she passed. She transitioned. So people would say, well, she wasn't healed. She wasn't healed of her cancer, but she was healed. She was healed of all the spiritual stuff that she had going on when she was here, all the junk that she needed to clear out. And once she was healed of that in her spirit, then her body was ready to let her go. And she's still an extremely powerful force even to this day. And she's come to many of us, you know, since she's passed. So that's my belief. So when I read your book, I don't see any negative outcomes.
Well, that's really cool, man. I like that perspective. I mean, I certainly feel for people and see the things that they've had to deal with, but I've also, like you, I've seen what they've overcome, and that is a positive, enlightening thing. And it does, I think the stories in the book do give you a belief that, you know, you want to say people can handle more than they can handle, and you pushed yourself to handle, or been forced to handle more than what you thought you could handle. But we can all take more, right? We can all handle more.
Yeah, that's the thing. We need to see the hero in ourselves. I mean, we read the books, like I read Viktor Frankl's, you know, Man's Search of Meaning, you know, being in a concentration camp, and we we watch movies and stuff like that, and we think, well, that's somebody else. They could do that, but I can't do it. But I think these books, when we read your book, you remember these are common people. These are people just like you and I.
Yep.
And you said at the very beginning, it's we deal with what we have to deal with.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and look, thankfully, there's people like you that people can turn to help them try to better understand the things that they're dealing with. And all you're trying to do, I'm sorry if this is not right, but I think what I've gotten from the brief interaction I've had with your voice is that what you're trying to do is help people deal with the difficult things they're dealing with, and provide them maybe with some avenues to explore to help understand what they're going through.
Yeah.
And the fact that you're willing to do that is having an effect on people, and sometimes maybe even a profound effect on people. And that's a good thing, right? That's a good thing to not just stay in our bubble and keep our mask on. It's a good thing to open up and to help share, because, not everybody believes this, but I believe that part of why we're here is to help each other.
Yeah. Well, I believe that. I believe that's a big reason why we're here. And I was again just talking to a client right before we got on, and we were talking about the idea of reincarnation and coming back. And when your child transitions, every single parent I've ever known says, "I'm never doing this again." And I'm like, don't say never, because I think a lot of us come here to help other people. I think that's the reason why we're here. And when I see a project like your book project. And you just said it. I believe a big reason we're here is to help other people. This is what you're doing. You said, I'm going to take what happened to my sister. I'm going to take what's going on in my life, this abandonment that I feel, this loneliness I feel, and I'm going to turn it into something positive. I'm going to help other people process this feeling.
Yeah. Yeah. And it's nice. It's nice to know when people say, wow, that moved me, or wow, that gave me a perspective I didn't have. That's a neat thing to be able to do.
Yeah, well, I think that's what we're here for. So, David, I want to thank you very much for being on, and I want to give people your contact information. So your website is david-richman.com, and it's RICHMAN. And the book link is david-richman.com/cycle of lives, with dashes between cycle of and lives. I'll put that in the show notes. And for anybody that's watching on YouTube, this is the book cover.
Hey, look at that.
So it's David Richman's Cycle of Lives, 15 People's Stories, 5,000 Miles, and a Journey Through the Emotional Chaos of Cancer. It's an excellent book. It's as you said, it's a heavy subject, but I think you'll come away feeling good after reading it.
Thank you. Yeah. And the book's available wherever books are sold, Amazon, Barnes & Noble, you name it, you could buy a signed copy on the website. Doesn't matter where it's bought. Varying levels of profit depending on where you buy it, but 100% of the net on every avenue goes to support these wonderful organizations that are all trying to make a difference and help people. So I just think there's nothing bad that can come of it.
Yeah. Well, Dave, I want to, again, thank you for being here. Thank you for your project. Someone asked you, what do you think June would think if she gets, and I know June is proud of you, and I know June is still with you. That's my belief.
Well, it's sweet of you to say that. I'm finally starting to be able to process that thought. It's hard. It's hard. It's a hard thing to think about.
Yeah, for sure.
So thank you.
Oh, great. It's good meeting you. Enjoy the rest of your day.
You too, Brian. Take care. Thanks again. Really, really appreciate it.
Thank you.
Take care.
That's it for another episode of Grief to Growth. I sure hope you got something out of it. Please stay in contact with me by reaching out at www.grieftogrowth.com. That's growth.com. Or you can text the word growth to 31996. That's simply text growth, GROWTH, to 31996. Since you're watching this on YouTube, please make sure you're subscribed. So hit the subscribe button and then hit the little bell here, and it'll notify you when I have new content. Always, please share the information if you enjoy it. That helps me to get more views and to get the message out to more people. Thanks a lot, and have a wonderful day.